Hi, I'm John Gagliano, Senior Director of BioPharmCatalyst.
Hello, I'm Chef, known as Chef Station, a 20-year vet in trading biotech stocks.
And this is Biotech Bulls and Breakthroughs. Just a reminder that we are not a registered investment advisory firm, and the views on this podcast are not intended to be financial advice. Invest at your own risk. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're at. Welcome once again to another episode of Biotech Bulls and Breakthroughs. I'm John Gagliano, Senior Director of BioPharmCatalyst, and today is July 30th, 2025. And we're really excited to be joined today by Annalee Armstrong, Senior Editor from BioSpace. I'm sure many of you who are listening in are familiar with BioSpace. They're a huge news organization covering the healthcare and the biotech sector. And BioPharmCatalyst has actually partnered with BioSpace in the past. We've provided a couple quotes on different companies and different catalysts for some of their articles. So we're really excited to have Annalee on to talk a little bit more just around the general markets, the biotech markets, maybe cover a little bit more on what's happening within the life science area itself, which is a little different than what we normally do, more on the which is clearly more on the investor side. But I think it's really relevant. It's something that some folks have asked us for to do a deeper dive. So we're really excited to have you on, Annalee, and welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So I guess maybe just as a way to just get started, if you wouldn't mind just kind of giving us just a little background on what you do specifically at BioSpace as senior editor and just, general background on kind of your career history and how you got to where you are.
Yeah, for sure. So I've been at BioSpace now for a year. I'm coming up on my 1-year anniversary next month. So it's been a really great, intro to this company. We basically cover the biopharma industry. We have several newsletters. We have Clinica Space. We have a daily newsletter that's just basically, collecting all of the news of the day. What I do is I am in charge of the BioPharm executive newsletter, which goes out on Wednesday, and I collect basically all the news that executives in the C-suite want to be reading is kind of my purview. So that can be anything from the markets, of course, to, the craziness at the FDA, to, new companies that are up and coming, deals, that kind of thing. So prior to BioSpace, I was at Fierce Biotech. I got my start in, healthcare and pharma journalism back at S&P Global. I've been covering this beat now for, something like 8 years. So, I've been here long enough now where drugs that I covered that were just babies are now approved and on the market. So it's been a great life cycle.
That's really cool. And as we know, that with the FDA approval, that takes quite some time. So that's really cool to see you've kind of been there since maybe in some cases since phase 1 or the INDs all the way through the actual approval stage. So
yes, definitely.
So, I guess just to kind of, I think we'll talk about a couple different things today, maybe a little bit about the markets. But I do want to get into some specifics around, growth areas, and maybe some specific therapeutic areas and indications. But, I guess just to start, most of our customers at BioPharmCatalyst, most of the people that subscribe to our website or our API are on the investor side. So they are, looking at publicly traded biotech companies, trying to figure out, which ones they might like to invest in based off of their underlying financials, based off of their clinical trial pipelines, right? Which is a lot of what we cover with respect to our catalyst. So from the clinical side, and let's just say also ideally the publicly traded side of the equation. I mean, what areas of the market are most exciting to you right now? So that could either be they could either be specific companies that are developing something. It could be maybe a particular, therapeutic area that you think is prime for growth. Kind of where do you see excitement in this space right now?
Yeah, so we can't get through this without talking about the weight loss drugs, GLP-1s. I'm sure we're going to talk about that a little bit more later, but I think that there's a lot of excitement there. I would say that for me, though, I kind of set that stuff aside. Where I'm really excited is the neurodegenerative space.
Okay.
Alzheimer's has always been my beat since I began in this. It's been really important to me, like personally and professionally. I have family who have Alzheimer's,
Yep.
so it's been incredible to watch these drugs come up. And I think that something like the GLP-1 drugs and some of the other things that are happening in biopharma are maybe overshadowing this space a little bit. I would like it to have a higher profile. So many companies are working on new drugs for Alzheimer's right now. We just had Roche kind of return to the scene. They had a really, unfortunate failure a few years ago.
Yeah.
There was that three-way race with Lilly and Eisai and Biogen, and they were the third horse in that race, and they unfortunately, had a clinical failure.
Yeah.
But they just returned to the scene this week with some really early data that was very exciting for their brain shuttle technology.
Yeah, we saw that come through.
Yeah, that was really great. Lilly's got a new a follow-up. I believe it's called Remternetug. That's coming out. They have a big readout for that coming next year.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of exciting stuff happening in that space, and I just any biotechs that are working there, I just really want to see them succeed, and I hope we see some more energy return to that space.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think we see a lot of that on our side of the equation as well. Just in terms of folks, whether it's just anecdotally, kind of asking about that space, or, even, when we have our, when we have some of our partners on who are talking on more the investment side of the equation, they're certainly excited about that space as well. So I would say that we agree with that, and it's something that we're definitely seeing and is being echoed just on our end as well. I think like your point about the GLP-1 is interesting, because I feel like that's, it's something. It's a tough one, right? Because I feel like there's so much excitement around it, and it's gotten so much hype. I mean, is there a situation where it's just kind of overhyped at this point? I mean, is this market kind of oversaturated? I mean, we just saw, I'm pretty sure Novo just, their stock just kind of, tanked on, sort of their readjustment in terms of how they're thinking about the forecasting around that. So what is your thought on that space in general?
Yeah, I mean, Novo is, unfortunately for them, old news at this point. I think they didn't plan for this next phase of the market that was going to come behind them. They didn't expect Lilly to kind of rise up and take over. I don't completely dismiss GLP-1s. I absolutely think there is a lot of room to improve on these drugs. I mean, we know that people are having very, difficult gastrointestinal side effects. That absolutely has to be fixed. And I do think there's a lot of innovation. There are probably drugs in the clinic right now that will fix that. Although in recent months, we really, have seen pretty similar results on safety. So anybody who can crack that safety problem is going to do well. Yeah. I think there's some really cool biotechs out there that are doing that. I'm thinking like Viking.
Viking Therapeutics. Yeah.
Love Viking. Love their name. They've always been a favorite of mine, just from their branding. But yeah, there's a lot of exciting companies that are doing things in GLP-1. And I think they need to take those side effects very seriously, and that's where we need to drive.
And so when you say around the safety, just can you elaborate just a little bit more, just for folks who may not be as familiar? Like, what have been sort of the main concerns that we've seen and need to be addressed?
Yeah, so the major ones have been gastrointestinal side effects, things like nausea, vomiting, diarrhea. This really changes your appetite. There needs to be education around your diet and that kind of thing. But then there's also been concerns with the early GLP-1s about, bone density, and people are losing muscle in addition to fat. So
Yep.
that's a big concern. And that's what a lot of the bigger companies are now trying to do in the next generation. And there's also some very exciting biotechs who are trying to say, hey, listen, we have that drug for you. Come and partner with us. So
Yep.
those companies have been very smart.
Right, to kind of have something to sort of treat that issue as well. No, that's very good to know for folks on the call as well, right? Is to understand, to that exact same point, where is the weakness, right? And so then you can start thinking about, okay, well, if this is a huge space, right, to be investing in, and this is a weak area, safety, right, and you're talking about bone density, muscle loss, well, then maybe it's worth investigating, okay, well, who are the players in the space that are going to be able to, to your point, a partner or assist in some of that. So it's kind of it's a way of expanding upon something that's kind of really hot and growing and continuing to be spoken about basically every day.
Yeah, and I think that, as we've seen with even, Amgen had their candidate, which is called Maritide, that was like so promising. Yeah. Like everybody was saying it was going to be the next best thing, but the safety results, they're very early. Like I need to, caveat that.
Yeah.
But, they weren't what analysts were hoping for. So there is room for a small biotech to come up. Now, I am not an investor. I do not invest in any of these biotechs. I love being able to say that publicly because occasionally I get accused of that. But if I am an investor, I think it's very difficult to pick the horse at this point. Who is going to be that biotech that's actually going to do it? I don't know. There's too many of them out there at this point.
Yeah. Absolutely. And there's just so many sides to the equation, right? I mean, you have folks that are, a little bit on like small, obviously like a Viking Therapeutics is nowhere near what, a Novo is, right? Just in terms of like market cap and stuff. So that has to be factored in as well. So, it's very interesting. I mean, it's something that I feel like a lot of times I'm hesitant to bring it up because I feel like it's already in the news a lot. We talk about it a lot, but it's like, because of the attention it's garnering, it's something that you just can't ignore. But again, I thought your point about, neurodegenerative diseases kind of being like Alzheimer's being overshadowed a little bit. It's also a good point is like, don't buy too much into the hype around GLP-1. There is still a lot of other opportunity, plenty of diseases that need to be cured and need to be addressed. And I think that presents opportunities for other areas of the market as well. So,
yeah. And, I think it's also worth mentioning oncology. I think the oncology world's maybe been a little bit quieter over the past couple of years.
Yeah.
But, one of the companies I'm definitely watching is Merck. They just had their earnings yesterday. And I'm not necessarily because of what they are doing internally, but who they're going to be buying as they try to fix this kind of like Keytruda, vacuum that's going to come when they lose their patent protection.
When they lose the patent, right? Exactly. Well, that's another thing we've talked about in a lot of the episodes is this patent cliff, right? We're kind of in this period where you have a drug like Keytruda where, what's really going to happen with that, right? That's something that they have to address, right? Internally. And to your point, it's something that they're looking to do. That also potentially, again, presents opportunities for a lot of other players in a space that has been somewhat, I mean, I don't want to say like monopolized, but like dominated for sure.
Yeah. And, Merck just bought Verona Pharma. I believe that was a $10 billion deal. That was not in oncology. That was for a COPD drug. But on their earnings call yesterday, they were quick to say, we want more. We're still out there looking. So, I would be keeping an eye on anybody who's got a partnership with Merck, especially in oncology right now.
Yeah, for sure. That's a great point. So just kind of switching gears a little bit. One area, and I don't know how much of this you cover, but one area that kind of seems to be growing and also garnering a lot of attention, not quite as much as like GLP-1, but is just sort of the general psychedelic drug space, right? And is there any, I mean, what are your thoughts on that market? Is that a market that you're familiar with at all? And which players or drugs are most exciting to you kind of in that market?
Yeah, so I have kind of deliberately avoided this beat over the years, mostly because people who love to cover this really love to cover it, and they're
Yeah,
very fascinated by it. So I, say go forth. But I tend to be the editor on these pieces, so I certainly see it anyways.
right.
And I know my colleague Heather McKenzie just did a bunch of stories on kind of the state of the market. I would say, Compass Pathways has been, making some strides. Atai, I
Yeah,
definitely think that there is a lot of promise with psychedelics, but monetizing these things is a real challenge. Just ensuring that there's a market, or that companies can make money off of them,
yeah,
um, especially after the fallout from Lycos last year when they got rejected by the FDA.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So basically, there's some potential upside, but possibly a fair amount of risk, kind of, in your opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I see that investors are very interested though. Like they, I just think that psychedelics has this draw. Like I said, how reporters that I've worked with have been so fascinated by this. I think investors are the same thing. The general public, it's the same thing. When we talk about GLP-1s, psychedelics is another area of pharma that has really kind of like crossed into the public zeitgeist. People are really fascinated by these therapies, and they see the potential. And so we absolutely can't dismiss that. I think in the wake of what happened with Lycos last year, this has to be done very carefully.
yeah.
Um, I think that companies really need to cross their T's and dot their I's here.
And maybe even more so than in some other areas.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And, again, we can't really, I have no idea how the FDA would have handled that Lycos situation today, given what's going on at the FDA. So I can't speak in those kind of hypotheticals, but like, basically what I'm saying is like, there's a completely new FDA. We don't know.
right.
We have no idea what the next psychedelic therapy is going to face when it gets there.
That's a great point, just about the changes that we've seen. I guess that's actually a great segue, kind of, into the next thing that I wanted to discuss, which I was at a summit, several months back, and I did a podcast on the findings on that, and I think, or I should say, the takeaways from the summit, and that was really what all of the CEOs and the chief medical officers and everybody at these biotech companies were saying, is that we just need to focus on continuing to follow the science, create good science, and to try to cure these diseases, and that's what our job is ultimately, right? And
Yeah.
that's what the focal point needs to be.
Yeah, and the biggest risk right now, and we're already seeing this, is delays in those PDUFA dates. We are already seeing those, and that is dangerous for the biotech and the pharma industries. Drugs. It's very important that these drugs get approved. We know with all of these layoffs, all of this upheaval, one of the immediate takeaways from Prasad's departure was that there's going to be delays to PDUFA dates,
Yeah.
and that's real. That's material for companies.
Well, it's interesting you should bring that up, because it was a couple months ago that we had brought that up, and and at the time, that hadn't taken effect yet. Like, we hadn't necessarily seen the fallout from that, but now, to your point, we're starting to see that a little bit. And
Mhm.
again, in an industry that is like certainty, and particularly for us, from a catalyst perspective, right? Like, our traders, like, or people who use our site, rely, like PDUFA dates, because there is a certainty to the date.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of times where companies are saying, okay, well, we're going to release data in Q3, right? And then you don't
Yeah.
really know what that is until it gets a little bit closer. PDUFA, it's like, hey, this decision is coming on September 27th, right? And if that starts becoming more fluid than something that was that had a degree of certainty now doesn't, that is potentially problematic, and something that, like, we need to definitely keep an eye on.
Yeah, absolutely. Like that is the one thing everybody maintains their PDUFA calendars. We always know that in AdCom. We used to
AdCom too.
always know
Yep.
when AdComs were happening. But yeah, we've seen a few delays at this point, and I think we're going to see more.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's good to know, and something that is certainly worth keeping an eye on. I guess just kind of, final real question from me here. and again, this is just a space that is just ever growing. You can't really log on to anywhere without talking about it. Is AI, right? And where do you? I like to ask everybody this because I think, and the question sometimes may sound like redundant because it's like, oh, we're talking about AI again, but not everyone is giving the same answers in terms of where they're seeing the transformation and where they're seeing the growth, because there's just so much of it in every aspect. So I like to ask individuals to just see, okay, well, where are you seeing that being used? How, what ways do you see it transforming the industry? So just kind of, I just wanted to get your thoughts on AI as a whole.
Yeah, so I guess you can call me a little bit of an AI naysayer. I have a whole spiel, which I won't give you, but I just see so much money piling into AI-aided drug discovery. And we frankly have not seen results yet. And drug discovery takes time. Mm-hmm. AI was heralded as this amazing, salve that was going to fix that. It was going to slash the timelines down by years. And we're not seeing it. We're not seeing drugs come out of these companies any faster. Mm-hmm. The few drugs that have made it to the clinic have not been successful. They have about as good a record as good old-fashioned human. I'm at this point. I just want to see more. I want to see actual drugs that have been created by AI, safely tested in patients, so that we can start to understand, is this going to work? Is this going to cut down the timelines? Because I believe that if it can, that is going to be the most transformative thing. The thing that costs the most money in biotech and pharma is time. So if we can cut down on those timelines, that can be transformative.
Yeah, and kind of to that exact same point, I mean, unfortunately, in order to test the safety and the efficacy, you do need, unfortunately, time in order to do that, right? So
and you can't cut those steps. Those steps.
You can't cut corners on that, right? And so, I think that's something that needs to be taken into account. I mean, same thing when we were talking about the GLP-1. People have a tendency to get very excited about something, and they're all of a sudden they kind of jump from step 1 to step 9, like, oh, this is like transformative, like this is going to transform everything, but you still need to go through all of the steps of the process to ensure that it's going to work the same as if you didn't have it. Do you know what I mean? And so I feel like people don't tend to not have a patience when it comes to that.
Yeah, for sure. And I did a story a while back. I was really interested in the human element in AI. Like, you hear a lot about the AI is only as good as the data that you train it on. Well, a human has to make that decision, right?
Right.
So I kind of looked into more ways that humans are staying involved. And kind of my takeaway from it was a lot of the greatest drugs that have been developed, happened because two human beings met and their particular expertise just went together, and they were like, hey, what if we try this together? And we, somebody called it serendipity, which I really love that. And they kind of said, if AI can accelerate that serendipity, then we might have something very special. So my hope is that is what AI does. I think, we're seeing a lot of money. I want to see some of these big companies that are doing this produce some data. We're maybe getting there. Maybe in the next couple of years, we'll start to see it. But yeah, that's kind of how I feel about it. And, I also think a company like Sanofi, I think is being very smart.
Yep.
They're really integrating AI across their company, not just in the clinic, with administrative things. I think that's really smart. Big pharma is ripe for AI.
Absolutely. And that's where we're going to see probably the most action with respect to it currently. So I would concur on that. And that's something that we're hearing as well on our side. So,
yeah.
Cool. Well, that was all of the prepared kind of questions that I had, Annalee. Was there any last remarks that you had or anything else you wanted to touch on?
I would just say that it's a wild time to be a biopharma journalist and following this space. It's been exciting. It's been a lot of extra hours, keeping up with, things at the FDA. And just we're continuing forward, and I always invite people to reach out to me on LinkedIn. All my social media stuff is on the BioSpace website. If you have some good pitches, please send them my way. I'm eager to talk to anybody who can let me know what's going on in the markets.
Absolutely. And definitely check out biospace.com. I'm sure, like I said, most of you guys listening are familiar with it. But again, we love having partners on our podcast and with BioPharmCatalyst, and we're really just trying to make sure that folks have as much access to information for this industry as they can. So, and obviously for those listening in, if you want more information on catalysts, on any financial information for individual companies, please feel free to visit www.biopharmcatalyst.com. We have 3 subscription plans you guys can sign up for if you're interested in doing deeper dives into publicly traded biotech companies. So anyway, I really appreciate the time, Annalee. Thank you so much for joining us. And we will be on again in middle of August with Chef to talk some more catalysts, as we like to have him on each month. But Annalee, thank you so much again for being on with us.
Thank you so much. This has been great.
All right. Have a good one, guys.
Bye.